Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar here with HYCU. The focus and title is GitLab under lock, and we're going to focus on how to secure your source code via data protection. My name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at HYCU, and I'm very thankful for your time, for your attention. I hope to make this session extremely interactive between us and really have a dialogue and a conversation about not only protecting critical applications, but very, very important parts of your application lifecycle, especially GitLab. So if you have any questions, please use the chat function or the Q&A. Any question that you ask there, I will make sure to address, whether live right now or directly after the session via email. So I really appreciate your time. I'm going to give a couple more seconds to anybody else who's joining, and then we're going to get started. This slide and this deck will also be recorded. It'll be available on demand, and you will receive a copy of the deck as well in case you want to share it with your colleagues. Within that, let's get started. Why are we focusing on a specific application today like GitLab? Well, the reason that we're doing is we've decided, because of a lot of these recent events where we're seeing so many incidents of third-party risk, whether it is with a public cloud provider, whether it is incidents like CrowdStrike, whether it's supply chain attacks that we saw within the Snowflake side, what we're realizing is today, the software supply chain means that we all rely on third-party services to deliver something, whether that is GitLab, whether that is Salesforce, whether that is Microsoft 365. These are all now SaaS applications that we rely on. It's very important to understand not only their value and all of the incredible capabilities that you have with them, but also how do you make sure that you are protected and that you secure yourself and that you use this responsibly. So throughout the year, we're taking a look at very specific segments of IT, segments of DevOps, and really honing in on a specific application. And for today's discussion, we're really going to focus on GitLab. Why is GitLab so critical? Now, when you think GitLab, automatically you assume, okay, this is my Git repository. This is where my source code is. But there's so much more information and data and configuration stored within GitLab that it essentially operates as a version control system for your entire technology stack, especially on the engineering side. So think about it. What does GitLab actually contain? And I'd love to know, how you're using GitLab today in your organization. Feel free to make a comment. And if you're using GitLab and maybe other repositories throughout different parts of the organization, the principles are the same. When you think about it, obviously it contains your source code. It contains libraries, your dependencies, schema, configuration files. This is what we all know. But when you observe further, especially in cloud environments, you start to realize that it also hosts all of your templates, all of your configurations, whether that is a stack set in Terraform or in AWS CloudFormation. It contains a lot of the configuration and the fundamentals of how your CI/CD pipelines work. And this is a big no-no, but obviously still organizations also keep a lot of security configurations as well. Obviously, you should never be keeping keys and key management in here. That is not a best practice, but we've seen it happen in organizations. But your VPC configs, your WAF settings, all of these things are kept a lot of the times in a Git repository. And of course, a lot of the recipes that I like to call in the power your containerized and serverless organizations. If you think of things like Lambda and all of the functions and YAML files within Lambda, where do they sit? Well, they sit in your Git repository. Now, the point here is not to go on a diatribe about all of the things that are inside of GitLab, but it's about focusing on the fact that this single application contains so much critical information of your organization, whether it's your source code, your IP, your intellectual property, but also simply how your infrastructure works, how your cloud services communicate with each other. All of this information is inside of GitLab. But you're thinking, well, Andy, yes, this is critical to our organization, but this is GitLab. This is a SaaS application. This is a cloud vendor. I'm no longer hosting this as a server deployment on-prem. This is something that I'm simply subscribing to, and they are responsible for keeping it available, keeping it protected. Why are we having this conversation? And the reason this is so important is because this is a very dangerous myth that we encounter, not just in your Git repository, but across your entire cloud and SaaS stack. What we realize is there's a massive gray area between what you think you're responsible for versus what the vendor agreement mentions. And actually, one of the things that we commissioned a few months ago was a survey, an independent survey across hundreds of organizations. We're talking from IT administrators to chief information officers. We asked them a couple of questions. And what we found was that nearly half of them completely assumed that any type of data protection, any recovery, anything is GitLab's responsibility, that the customer, the tenant, holds no responsibility of that data. But let's talk about that role. And I love anybody's input in the chat and on the Q&A side. But the way that, whether it's GitLab, whether it's Jira, whether it's Confluence or Terraform, any of these services work, think of them as a parking garage. And what I mean by this is think of what your expectations are of a parking garage. You're going out with your family, you're parking in your garage, you just want a safe place to be able to park, use the service. So what do you expect? You expect that you can drive in, that you can pay, that the payment works, the gate is open, that the lights are on, that it's safe, that it's secure, and that when you come back, that you still have a car, right? That's the expectation. But what if you leave your window open and someone steals something out of your car, or somebody scratches it, or even another driver hits your car? Will the garage take responsibility for that? No, they actually have signs everywhere that says, hey, we're not responsible for this theft or damage. Now, I know this is a bit of a dumb analogy, but the point here is that cloud platforms, vendors, ISVs, it's the same relationship with SaaS. What do I mean by this? It means that GitLab is responsible for maintaining the service, meaning, can I access GitLab? Can I use it for what I'm paying for? So because of this, they have disaster recovery. They're following the 5 nines. They have high availability. They have system level backups. They have everything that they need to make sure that no matter what kind of disruption happens, whether it's a regional outage, any type of failure, even a security incident, that if something happens to the GitLab system, that they're immediately able to be back up and running. That you have minimal minutes of downtime. That's a responsibility. It's like the garage making sure that the lights are on and that payments can be processed. But you, as the owner of that project, as the tenant, you're still responsible for your data. And what I mean by this is, think about it this way. You can always assume, well, Andy, GitLab will recover this for me. And maybe there would be a best effort approach, but they have no legal liability for doing so. And the reason is it's incredibly hard for GitLab to understand, is this a mistake that someone's made, or are they just cleaning up their policies? It's really hard to understand what a good delete is versus a bad delete. So the approach that they take, along with every other vendor, like 365, like AWS, is whatever happens inside of your project, inside of your instance, this is your responsibility, because only you as a customer know what you're deleting versus what you're creating. And they urge you, and if you go and look at the vendor agreements, that you are responsible for backup and recovery. That doesn't mean they won't try to help you here and there, but it's not a dependable strategy if your organization requires you to have backup and recovery. But you might be thinking, well, it's in the cloud. I don't think I have to worry about it. There are no more VMs that are being corrupted. I don't have to worry about hardware failures. But there are real threats to think about. No matter where your application is, there are real threats to your GitLab data and configurations. So if you think about it, and I've actually had a lot of fun with this, there are very common categorical threats here, right? So there's always going to be human error. As long as there's people touching software, there's going to be a deletion incident. Someone's going to make a mistake, whether it's a very senior person or the intern who's been asked to clean up a couple of repositories. We're also seeing misconfigurations. You also always have the threat of insider threats, especially in Git repositories. Why? Because you have contractors, you have vendors who come in and help you. It could be very difficult to manage if you don't have the right offboarding policies. And people get disgruntled and they can go after some of your most critical application, AKA a Git repository. And of course, there's always external cyber attacks, especially when folks are looking to encrypt your source in your IP and threaten to breach a lot of this. And we've seen examples of this as well. But what we've done too is it's not simply as simple as somebody deleting a repository. There are so many different ways that could lead to data loss, to data alteration, that are very, very difficult to manage. So you can always guarantee that no matter who your organization is or how many developers you have, there will be incidents of data loss. I'll send this list out to everybody, but these are just some of the common ones that we've observed from our engineering perspective on what are simple, easy ways that happen every day where data in GitLab is deleted or lost. So the question is, organizations have to make a decision where you're fully aware that A, you are responsible for backup and recovery. GitLab is responsible for the service. You are responsible for your account and the data, the configurations, the repositories that live in this account. So you have to make a decision now around this. And we've actually put together a very quick checklist. I'll share something much broader at the end of the session. But essentially what you have to do is follow the fundamentals. Why? Although GitLab is an extremely hyper-secure application, they do an incredible job. Their trust center is amazing. They're always reporting on everything and continuously updating. But if you have bad password management, then that means nothing, right? So GitLab and any other SaaS vendor is always going to require you to make sure that you have multi-factor authentication, that you responsibly use permissions and operate on a least privilege, that you manage branch permissions, that you have review processes. This is basic hygiene from a development perspective. But the specific part of today's conversation on the checklist is you have to have backups, daily backups, because you know that something will happen. You now know that it's your responsibility. You have to make sure that you have daily backups and that those backups are actually stored somewhere outside of GitLab in case something does happen to GitLab. You always have data offsite. A lot of the times, anybody on this call probably remembers, we used to always understand the 3-2-1 rule. Whether it was physical or virtual backup, we knew that we required 3 copies on 2 media types and 1 offsite. And when we all moved and migrated to cloud and adopted SaaS applications, we kind of forgot about that. But the critical piece here is that this is still a fundamental requirement for any serious organization that's leveraging any SaaS application, especially something so critical like GitLab. So being able to have a regular backup that's automated, by the way, being able to store this somewhere offsite, not a hard drive inside of somebody's desk, but actual S3 compatible storage that you can manage, access, and secure. And then actually testing the recovery. You do not want to wait until you've actually had a deletion event to test if your backups are already working. But the decision that organizations have to make then is, well, what procedures do we follow? What kind of decision do we make here when it comes to backup and recovery? And what GitLab does, like every other vendor, is they give you an ability to export all of this data. And this means that you simply export a project and then you can re-import that project. But what's the challenge with this? Well, it's useful and it's effective and it's responsible that GitLab has developed this, but it's a manual process. This means that somebody is regularly, maybe every Thursday, exporting a GitLab project. What happens with this? One, you have a single point of failure. 2, if you were having to recover, especially in a larger organization, this could be a very difficult recovery process. Why? You're going to re-import your entire project. This could be very, very disruptive if you have a high change rate in your organization. And once again, this is a manual export that is unencrypted, most likely to a hard drive or a local device. This is a massive challenge. This is not backup, especially if you're in financial services, if you're in healthcare, any highly regulated organization. This is not an acceptable method of backup. So this is where organizations make the logical step to evaluate a third party for backups as well. And that's where we wanted to talk to you about today at HYCU. And I'll give you a little bit of insight, but the focus really today is on how to make sure that you have secure and automated backups for GitLab via the HYCU R-Cloud platform. And we're going to show you exactly how you're able to do this across your DevOps stack. I'll provide a demo of how this works. But the point here is you're going to move away from manual backups to a secure, automated, essentially an autopilot for GitLab that makes sure that you can always protect and recover your data. But let me tell you a little bit about HYCU. We have over 4,200 customers globally. We have an NPS score of 91. This is something that we pride ourselves. We've been protecting the crown jewels of organizations all over the world, whether it's on-prem, whether it's cloud, whether it's SaaS. Our business is about making sure that we have your back and that your data is protected, but most importantly, available. And what we focus on is not positioning just a single tool to be able to back up GitLab, but also the ability to protect your entire application lifecycle and even your production operation workloads as well. And we have been named as a visionary in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for backup and recovery. This is basically the evaluation tool every enterprise uses to understand, is this a vendor that I can trust with my data, especially something so important like backups. But let me actually, instead of going through the slides, let me show you exactly what this looks like, and we'll go from there. I'm going to stop sharing shortly. And then I'm going to share my screen. And if anybody wants to mention, if you don't see the screen, please let me know in the chat, but I think we're able to see it now. So what you're seeing here is the R-Cloud platform. Keep in mind, this is a SaaS service that can run specifically in the regions that you've defined, especially if you're in Europe, if you're under NIS2 and DORA requirements, you have residency requirements, HYCU will run wherever you need it to run, and the data will stay there. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to sign in quickly with MFA. And let's sign in real quick. Hoping the Wi-Fi is okay here. Give it a second. Let's try that again. Just give me a second. Let's see if we're loading. So I potentially may have some Wi-Fi issues. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to break down a couple of things. Once the demo is back up and running, I'm actually going to show everybody exactly how that works. So let me go back to our PowerPoint real quick, and we'll follow up on this demo. So one thing I'm going to mention here is, and what we're going to see in the demo as well, and I'll send this to everybody a live recording of this as well, is the primary focus is being able to actually automate all backup operations for GitLab and for any other application that you have. All you're doing is simply connecting HYCU via GitLab through an API token, discovering all of your projects, and assigning a backup. Now, you can assign a backup in one click, or you can essentially figure out if you want to have a certain retention period, how often you want to take these backups as well. And from there, you simply define where that data is going to go. And what you can do is essentially restore your projects, your requests, any types of configurations from GitLab specifically. And actually, my demo environment is running back, so let me go back to that now. I want to make sure I do not deprive anybody of the HYCU demo. So what you're seeing here is our dashboard. And I'll talk about another day how we're able to actually discover all of your services. But let's get right to the matter here. If there's any application that you want to protect with HYCU, you go to the marketplace. And you're going to be able to find every service that you want to be able to protect here. So if you are looking to protect GitLab, if you are looking to protect Jira, or even production services, even in Amazon VPC, this is where you go and you can connect at any point in time. But let's go quickly to GitLab. So here, all you're doing is you can actually learn more about GitLab, understand all of the things that you can restore, how the service works, you can configure it, and essentially simply connect via API token to GitLab. Once that happens, you now are discovering all of your projects within GitLab. And from there, you simply select GitLab and say, well, I'd like to set a backup policy. You can choose a backup policy, and you can assign that backup policy. And that's it. That means that you are not doing any more manual exports. You are not doing anything except automating the entire backup operation for GitLab. Now, many organizations might have custom requirements for this. So you might say, well, Andy, GitLab is extremely important for us. I'd like to make sure, because we have such a high change rate, I'd like to have backups assigned every 5 hours. Well, in that case, you can go and you can customize the backup policy. And you can say, well, I'd like to do a backup every 4 hours. Let's go hours here. And then I like to retain this data for a defined point in time. It doesn't matter if it's 7 days, 7 years, you get to choose exactly how long you keep those backups. But the most important part here is this is not simply about automating the backup process. This is about being able to also restore data. So let's say that in your organization, you have maybe hundreds of developers. Changes are happening all the time. There are automation templates. There are people touching every component. Even if you have least privilege, there's still going to be dozens of people touching things. And there's going to be merges. There's always going to be high activity here, especially when you're in release mode. Now, what you're able to do here, and keep in mind, without HYCU, your options is to re-import everything. You can restore a specific configuration, a specific object here within GitLab. So you can perform an entire project recovery, or you can dive in very specifically to a wiki, to an issue, to a release, to a feature flag. It doesn't matter what was deleted. You can restore that specific thing back to production instead of having to recover an entire project. Now, why is this important? Well, the developer makes a mistake. If somebody notices an issue in the organization and they realize that there might be a corruption of the issues, well, you can simply go and restore that single issue back to production. This saves time. This avoids disruption. This keeps everybody working. And I don't know if anybody in the organization has been through this in your company. When there's a massive deletion event, this halts everyone. Why? Well, you don't know what has been affected. You don't know how it's being remediated, and you essentially wait for IT to manage this. This is extremely disruptive to development organization. This allows you to simply select what you want to restore and then keep on focusing on building things. Now, the question that you may have is, well, this is my IP, this is my source code, where does this data go? And what you're able to do with HYCU, and something that philosophically is very important for us, is we don't store your backups. Your backups are your last line of defense when it comes to recovering from an incident, a deletion, or even an insider threat. It should not be in the hands of yet another vendor. It should be in your control. So with HYCU, what you're able to do is once you connect the source and when you connect GitLab, you can simply choose, well, where do I want those backups to be? Well, you can choose if you want to drive it to Amazon S3, to Azure, to Google Cloud, and it connects directly with your AWS account, with your Google Cloud account, and you can even send GitLab backups back on-prem, whether it's Nutanix Objects, Dell, OVH, or Cloudian, you can actually send that data back on-prem. You have full control of where you want to manage your backups. And this is very important because this brings back the 3-2-1 capabilities that a lot of people have been denied within SaaS. You have copies of your data, it's offsite, it's in your control, and you can always prove the recovery. This is extremely critical. But one thing I want to specify here is HYCU is not just about protecting a single application. It's about protecting your entire tool chain, your entire application lifecycle. So anytime that you see other specific applications, you must assume that if they're SaaS, they're probably not being protected. Well, you can come to the HYCU marketplace and make sure that they're all protected in the same manner that you're protecting GitLab. Let's dive in a little bit. And let me share this deck real quick. Perfect. Because the focus here is GitLab is made up of tool chain. It's one of the most critical services in that tool chain, but you're using many other things in your application lifecycle. And what HYCU does, what R-Cloud's able to do, is one, help you protect the services that you're using to build applications, where it all starts, whether it's customer research, whether it's issue management in Jira, whether it's any Git repository, especially GitLab in today's conversation, that all of those objects, those data, the configurations, the research, it's all available, it's all protected, and it's all recoverable. And even what you're using from a release perspective. So for example, Terraform, Cloud Formations, these are the recipe books for how your kitchen is run and how your development team and your infrastructure is managed. What if you lost all of that? Maybe you're keeping some of it in GitHub as version control, but for the most part, if somebody deletes a template or a stack set, a lot of organizations are in rough waters. But of course, you're also using services to secure the application, whether it's access management like Okta, whether it's on internal tools or even customer identity cloud, or what used to be known as Auth0 or Entra ID, but also all of the security services that you're using to run these applications. What VPC is it? What cloud IAM are you using? What's your key management look like? These are all things that HYCU is able to protect and then restore, and of course, also protect the source, meaning what are the critical production applications that your organization is running? This could be in AWS, this could be in Google Cloud, or this could be on-prem in Nutanix and VMware, and even file shares. The point is, HYCU is here to protect your organization across your entire tech stack, from build to run, and this is extremely critical. Now, there's a couple of components here that I want to mention, because our focus here and our philosophy is that the backup system must always be accessible outside of GitLab. This is the fundamentals of the 3-2-1 rule. These copies should always be offsite and in your control only. And even if you don't choose HYCU as your vendor of choice, the point here is please always prioritize that these backups are in your control and only accessible to you. You want to avoid as much third-party risk as possible. And although we know that deletions happen every day, we also know that cyber incidents do happen. Whether it's an insider threat or an external threat, it does not hurt to have a secure, immutable, worm-enabled copy outside of GitLab to recover from. And some of the core differentiators of our special sauce is one, you can completely customize your SLAs. You can say, I'd like to take a backup every 2 hours. I'd like to take one every 4 or every day. You can do it on a per project basis. So you really get full customization here. And of course, it's all automated. You have the full freedom to keep your data in your control. And you can make sure that you're not relying on these point solutions. You're relying on a platform that protects your source code and everything else as well. And of course, you're working with a trusted vendor that's recognized by Gartner and that's recognized as first class by our customers as well. But there's something that I want to specify here because it's very, very important to understand where the data is stored. And I'm giving you an example here of your backups running in AWS, meaning in your AWS account in an S3 bucket only controlled by you. First, of course, all data is encrypted at rest and in flight. This is in your AWS account. This is not in a HYCU store backup. This is your AWS backup. You get to choose the data residency, not only where HYCU runs, but where the data is stored. This is complete customization. And of course, you get to control access, the storage tier, and then you also always get the opportunity to enable object lock, to have worm-enabled backup copies as well. Now, one thing to mention, though, is we want to make sure that we give you the options to be able to store your backups wherever you choose. So you get to choose whether it's S3, your Google Cloud account, Azure, but on-prem as well. You have the ability to simply choose, this is my target, this is the storage that I trust, this is what we're using. I want to make sure all my cloud and SaaS backups are also stored here. But this is the crux of it. HYCU is the only vendor that's going to give you the ability to do this and to keep full control and still automate all of your backup operations across the board. So what I wanted to mention is I wanted to thank you all for your time. And I wanted to mention that the best thing to do is simply to try it. Try it for yourself. We have a 14-day free trial where you can immediately start backing up GitLab. If you scan the QR code and register, our team will get you up and running within minutes. In a few clicks, you'll connect to HYCU. You will discover your projects. You will sign a backup policy, and you are up and running. And something else that we've released is we've actually done a deep dive. And this is more on GitHub side, but it's applicable to GitLab. And we've done a full deep dive on all the ways that we've seen organizations delete or alter data inside of their repositories. This is very critical because it helps you prepare your organization to do so. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause for any questions. Let's see. Oh, this is actually a great question. Somebody asked me if HYCU is for GitLab and R-Cloud is DORA compliant. And actually, this is a great question. For those in the audience who might not be familiar with DORA, this is EU-focused regulation that is mandating any financial services institution in the EU to have backups off-site of their SaaS applications of cloud. That includes GitLab. It includes Circle CI. It includes Jira. And it requires an off-site backup. So HYCU is one of the few vendors and the only one in the world of GitLab and SaaS that allows you to store this data offsite as well. I'm going to pause there for any more questions, but you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can respond to the email, and I want to make sure to answer any of your questions. But I wanted to thank you for your time, for your attention, and I hope that you found this valuable today. Thank you so much.